Went to the operating room. First thing we do is exploratory laparotomy, where we literally just explore. And you feel the liver, because that's one of the first things you do. And it felt like a baby's liver, like smooth. I'm like, okay, I saw the scan last night, and I know this guy has metastatic lesions the night before. And he had just had the scans maybe a week
And you just
prior.
seen the scans.
So I told my attending, I said, again, I'm a young surgeon, so I was doubting myself, like, I know I looked at that scan last night, and we all know he has metastatic disease. He put his hands on the liver. He said, this feels like a baby's liver.
Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Christina Rahm, and I am here with Dr. April Spencer. And I'm so glad to have her here today because we're going to talk about all things medical and scientific and clinical that will hopefully help people throughout the world.
I love that. Thanks for having me.
Well, you're
I'm super
famous.
excited.
You're on Fox News. You got the Presidential Award.
I did.
So will you do me a favor?
Mm-hmm.
Brag a little bit about yourself.
Well,
Please, because no, I mean, so as women, we are taught at a young age to not really brag about ourselves,
we
right?
are, but we have to learn that modesty is not the mood.
Right.
Not right now, especially
Not
if
right
you
now.
want to make a difference. And especially as it relates to the young girls that are watching, we've got to be mindful of how we manage that messaging. But I've been a surgical oncologist, just a surgeon for over 22 years, and have spent a lot of work in the breast cancer surgery and reconstructive space. But one of the things I'm most proud of is just being an advocate for women. And I always say, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. And so my goal being having a privileged seat at the table, having the privilege of the podium and privilege of your platform, I'm able to help inspire, the young scientists or the young, creatives out there to just be the best version of themselves.
Yeah.
And so the Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award was just to honor the work that I've done, helping women at low cost or no cost to just go from their breast health to their best health. That's kind of like my mantra, or how to treat it, beat it, move on. That's so much more than just checking the medical boxes.
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful that, the highest office in the land appreciated that.
Well, you're doing something as a pioneer that I understand a lot because I worked at, I think you know this, Pfizer, Biogen, IDEC, Bristol Myers, UCB, Alexion.
All the big ones.
All the big ones. At Biogen, I was in the immunology, dermatology division, but I also consulted with the neurology because, we had Tysabri, which was for multiple sclerosis. And then, of course, Biogen bought IDEC, or they merged, and so it went into oncology. And I really dug deep into that. I ended up at one point having... I remember we had 23 investigator-sponsored trials one year, and I was running 17 of them.
Wow, that's impressive.
So I really dug in, even though my background, I was not a scientist. I was a psychologist. My master's was in science. But I was, my first doctorate degree was psychology.
But I don't think that was by accident.
You
Dr.
don't?
Rahm. No, because it takes a lot of psychology to be able to understand what we're doing from a scientific standpoint, and just to be able to merge that clinical
I know,
and
there's
professional
never a
experience.
coincidence.
No.
Right? I always say this, if I could have planned my life, it would never have been as great as it really has ended up being, because I've had really tragic things happen, and I'm sure you have too. It's one of the things when women have accomplished things like they see an oncologist. It's a surgical oncologist, and I want to take 1 second to say this and take a breath. That's a major job, what you're doing.
It's a passion project, for sure.
It's a passion to do what you're doing, and I can say, because I was in the middle of that, and even there was a period of 5 years where I really focused on neurosurgeries and orthopedic surgeries and that research. The surgical component of treatment is a lot of work, and I want to tell the audience this: the pressure, the stress, the amount of emotional, mental, and spiritual and physical toll that puts on your body is huge. And I've always said this, I could never have done it. I want my audience to hear that, because I did end up going to Kesman and getting my medical degree at over there.
Yes.
But I never ever have intended to be a medical doctor, and definitely not a surgeon. And if you ask me why, don't think I could do it. Just the toll on my body and not just physical, but emotionally, mentally,
mental,
and spiritually. And I just want to say to you, you're a pioneer
Thank
in
you.
what you're doing. I love when you're talking about you're doing this for women, but you're also empowering women. I want to thank you for that.
No, thank you.
I want to.
appreciate that.
I mean that. I think we need more women like you, and so what you're doing is really powerful. And you have not just accepted this mission as a surgeon. You've accepted this to look at emotionally, mentally, and spiritually helping people. I would love for you to explain that a little bit.
Well, I appreciate you and the work that you're doing, because it allows that validation that, hey, you're on the right path. Because oftentimes when you go against the grain and move on the path that you know is the right journey that patients need to be on, I look at them as not necessarily patients, but these are our clients, these are our customers. We're trying to go from not just checking the medical boxes, but really understanding that when you get to the surgical atmosphere, you're just scratching the surface. That's a Band-Aid solution, a very important part, but we have got to get to the root cause analysis. And I think a lot of the work that you do allow us to have these sort of conversations and give us the tools that we need to allow women to understand that there's a spiritual component, there's a mental component, there's an emotional component. And we just don't talk enough about that in medicine.
How did we lose? I want to ask you, how did we? Because I asked this question of myself, and you are a woman of influence, honestly, in the medical clinical research and honestly business world. So how did we lose that? Because if you go back, even if you look at Freud, right?
Yes.
if you look at our scientific evolution, we incorporated the emotional and mental and psychological component, and that was medicine. And then how did we
That's
lose
traditional
that?
medicine.
I know. How did we? How did that happen? Because from our perspective, we're kind of pioneers and outliers. All we're doing is talking about how do we help women and men overall, right? How do we help their overall body, which is medicine and science.
Yes.
So how do you think we lost that, and what can we do about it? I hear what you're doing, and I want you to provide that encouragement for other people, because we need more people like you.
Yeah. I think we just need to put the care back in healthcare.
Yeah.
And it became very corporate. And so the suits started kind of making the decisions. And we need to put the patients, our clients, and scientists back in the driver's seat. And that's what I'm loving about what you're doing and what we can collaborate and do together is just put the people first and put them back in the driver's seat of their healthcare, so that we're focusing on health span and not lifespan per se.
I like that. I like that a lot. You're saying these catchphrases, and I'm like, that's great.
Yes, and so that's where our focus needs to be. And the light bulb moment that went off for me, kind of went off a couple of years ago, but it really was hit home during COVID. And during COVID, we, to save resources during this global emergency, surgeries were not allowed or permissible unless their death was imminent within 24 hours. So I had to start having conversations with my patients about, okay, what are some of the things that we can do in terms of root cause analysis of the cancer? Let's start focusing on that.
Yeah.
So although you can't have your surgery right now, we can still be
Yeah.
proactive in our approach. And it just reminded me that, listen, the foundation of medicine is plant-based, spiritual-based.
Right.
So let's get back to that. And so I started having conversations with patients when they were diagnosed with breast cancer. A lot of times I was doing their biopsies, and I would share with them, you have, cancer. Cancer doesn't have you, but let's talk about what has your life been like for the last 6 months to 1 year. This is pre-COVID.
Yes.
Okay? And so inevitably, these women would talk about a recent divorce. They would talk about toxic family environments. They would share with me very dysfunctional work environment. And so that let me know that so much more to it than just, you have a breast cancer gene or a genetic predisposition. I knew that it was environmental, but it was also spiritual warfare that we need to address. And so my premise was, let's start talking about people being spiritual surgeons in their life and cutting out things that aren't adding value. And that was the traditional premise of medicine. People
it really
saw
it was
healers in the community, and it wasn't necessarily traditional practitioners as we know them, but they were spiritual healers, and they gave people the insight in terms of cutting out these toxic spiritual environments to help change their internal environment.
Yeah, I remember, so one of the aha moments for me in my life was, and I've shared with you, I had a prolactinoma pituitary tumor,
Yeah.
partial molar pregnancy, syringomyelia, then I had squamous basal. I've had, it just spread throughout my body. So for me, an aha moment was a doctor telling me this is what's going to happen. Like, I'll give you an example. One of our closest friends was a radiology oncologist, right? And when we ended up doing 2 rounds of nuclear isotopes while I was pregnant with my daughter, we didn't know. And so, of course, they recommended immediate medical abortion, not a regular abortion.
Yeah.
Medical, because there was no way that she was going to be okay. I'd already lost a child to cancer, had another child with cancer, Kreider, that you just met over there. And this happened, and I said, I'm at Vanderbilt, right? Went to Sarah Cannon, went to Vanderbilt. I know all the people. I'm in all the meetings. And they were like, we just cannot recommend that you have this child. My daughter is now 19 years old.
Oh, my God.
And here's what they
That
said.
gave me chills.
I said, I've been praying about this.
Yes.
And I know you're going to think this sounds crazy. This is what I said. And my OBGYN, I have to say her name out loud, is Dr. Marianne Blake. Amazing, amazing. She didn't necessarily agree with my decision, but she supported it 100% because she believed in a woman's instinct and gut feeling. So we did not know this was a little girl, but I'd had this dream I was having a little girl since I was young. And so I said, I know this is going to be a girl.
And she was your first.
This is my last. So I've already gone through cancer. I've already gone through all this. So I'm sitting in you know how you have a group of doctors? Like, we even had a nuclear physicist from Vanderbilt.
Oh, wow.
And they were like, you've gone through 2 rounds of nuclear isotopes during this pregnancy, and we cannot advise you to have it. And
Sure.
And it was really my fault. I went through 2 rounds because we knew all the doctors. So when they asked if I needed a pregnancy test, I had just had a son. I said, no, I'm on a low dose birth control. There's no way I can be pregnant. And I was pregnant.
Wow.
And so, but what I was going to say is, this is just one example. If I would have listened to that, I said, I have a gut instinct this is going to be a girl. And of course, their response is, you can have another girl later. I said, no. I have a very strong instinct, and I've been praying about this, and I'm going to carry this pregnancy. And no one agreed with me. And I just have to say this. If you ask me, where did I get that feeling? It was through prayer.
Wow.
And I understand everyone has a different path. I don't judge other people's paths. I don't actually even tell people what to do with their lives because it's their life. I follow what God, I feel, is my path. But if you always listen to what someone else's opinion is for your life, even if it's a doctor or a scientist, we're not God, right?
And only He knows.
And He knows. And I think, for me, here's where I keep getting... I mean, I have worked for the top companies. You have worked in the top occupation. And I keep thinking, where are we going wrong here? Because as women, we know that natural supplements, preventative skin care, right? All of these things are so important. So how did we put that on the shelf? And here's what I think we did. We put our hearts on the side. We put our brains on the table. But we left out the heart side of our brain. And the emotional IQ of what we have, and we know this right now, is one of the most important things that we have as a human guideline. In fact, your CIA, your FBI, your intelligence offices of the United States hired those people with discernment and instinct, right? So we've got to give that back to human beings. We have to.
Yeah. And not let that be something that's considered bad or detrimental because it's disruptive, but that is what it needs to be. And that's why it's been so much disease. I think. You know, and it's just us, our bodies and our mind not being at ease. And so it's getting people back to nature, back to nurture, and putting our heads and our hearts back together again. And so I love that.
I love what you're doing because I want to know where this is an honest question. Who else is like you that's doing this?
Other than you?
Yeah. No, I mean an oncologist, a surgical oncologist.
Yeah, I have to say it could be very isolating.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of us that are in this space that want to use our hands, our head, and our heart.
Have you been attacked in any way for your stance on really integrative oncology?
Yeah, definitely. But I think, like when you take a stance, you just know that you're going to be at at risk. And when I have taken stances at, various hospitals, like I pray for my patients, and with my patients, I ask for permission. I don't want to be accused of spiritual abuse.
Yeah.
But it's a big part of my practice, and just doing the right things for patients. And when you sometimes stand up, you just know you're going to get pushback, where the hospitals will start, looking into things that they normally wouldn't look into, and try to make it put an environment that's unnecessary roughness.
Yeah.
But when you know who you are, whose you are, and who you work for, I work for him, and I work for his people.
Like me. Yeah, I always say I only answer to one person, and I think I offend people. In fact, I always think this: it's got to be hard to be Clayton. I always think that, because for me, I think it's a longer story, but since I've been little, this has been my path, and for me, that's who I answer to. And so. But there are tough days. And I don't believe, and I talked to you about this, I don't believe we have the advancements with, and I'm not trying to bring up a negative subject, but with minorities, with women, however you want to say it, with different races, I don't feel like we've made the advancements that we should have made. I'm not angry. I want to change it. I want to empower it. And when I say this about women, I'm just going to tell you this. I don't believe it's just men that have hurt women. I think women have hurt each other.
Oh, definitely.
And as scientists, you're at the top. Doctors and scientists are at the top of they've worked really hard to get there, right? And maybe not everyone's been nice the whole time.
No.
I tell the kids this all the time. The prettier you are, the smarter you are, the more money you make, the more influence you have, the higher position in life. Pick a topic, right? Yeah. And my mom always says this: you're not going to get to heaven with that you won a pageant, right? Or that you're homecoming queen. No one cares. You won an award in Forbes. No one cares, right? I mean, I love Forbes, but no.
Me too.
And I contribute to Forbes. So, I didn't mean to use that name, but it doesn't matter, right? That's not going to get you in the door. What gets you in the door is the work that you've done and how you have contributed to him and to this life here. And I have to say, we haven't, as females, we're here to nurture, right? And serve, but we're also here to lead. Like if you read Proverbs, and we talk about the woman's in the field and she's gathering the hay and she's, feeding her family, right? But we've got to provide this network of empowerment, which is why I ask you to come to the Elysium Women's Circle, and why I'm inviting you and nominating you for an award.
Well,
because
thank you for that.
not that you need not that you need me at all, because you're on this path of enlightenment to really help people and to serve him first, then help people. But I do think that we have a lot to do. And I feel like if we can work together,
Definitely.
that we can do a lot more. And I love what you said, and I've repeated it so many times since then. Say it again about collaborating versus competing.
Yes. So I just have this premise that people on the bottom compete and people at the top collaborate. And we just need to have more people that have estrogen collaborating, because I think we have a different way of looking at things. I think we have the emotional and mental fortitude and intent to go from idea to execution in a different way than men. And I think there's value. We add value as a human race, but I think women have a certain sort of ability to multitask emotionally and mentally and physically that gives us an advantage to help people in a way that is just immeasurable. And so we just need to have more women to embrace that. Need to have more leaders that are women in science. And that's why I appreciate our collaborative relationship so much, and our heart relationship so much, because we have shared vision and we share values, but it's not a lot of us that are out there that's doing it. So,
no. And you need, when you're on a pharmaceutical team, which I was for so many years, we would have 21 scientists on a team.
And you were probably the only woman.
Well, I want to tell you this. I was usually the only woman that had children. So we had, actually, I wasn't the smartest. I always say this. I wasn't the best.
So crazy, because I say that too. I just worked really hard.
I worked really hard.
And I had a big heart.
And I worked really hard. I was never too good to do something. I always would I would jump in and help with anything. And they needed someone, basically, if you really look at the summary of my career, I understood business. I had businesses I owned on the side in the healthcare arena, or not even on the side. We funded them, we started them. I ran them from a board position, though. I wasn't running them every day. And then I'm working in the pharmaceutical industry, and they needed a female that was a scientist that could then also relate to people. Because one of the problems you have in the pharmaceutical biotech arena is your scientists that are in the lab, getting them on stage to discuss the molecule.
Forget about it.
Forget about it. They're so smart. And I always said I was the least smart, so they used me. So they were like, we let Christina do it. So I ended up getting the doors open to every top, honestly, oncologist in practice in the country and throughout, because of just my willingness to understand every piece of the business and to not be intimidated by people.
And you could go from bench to bedside to business.
Yeah, I
literally.
Did. Well, yeah, because when you do investigator-sponsored trials, you're over that patient. Yeah. And you only got patients in those trials, I'm sure you know this, that there was no other option. Right? Yeah. So I took... And I remember the heaviness of my heart, and I've said this in an interview before, when I realized, okay, so we could have a human monoclonal antibody, or we could do a cloning mechanism, or we can develop a transplant, right? There was all kinds of things we were working on, and you could have that and not produce it in the country, because if you don't have the money to back that, you can't release it. If your pipeline goes against that molecule, then you're not going to release it. If the board of directors has another one in another company, because you really have to look at the fact, it's like anything, like we could come up with the best scientific medical approach for oncology, but if you can't launch it from a business perspective, you're never going to be successful. So I would say your issue with a lot of scientists that are really benchmark scientists is they've got to understand the marketing and business side, and then you've got to get your scientists, just like doctors, to not be jealous of each other and to not compare. Like, look, my husband Clayton's one of the smartest people I know, but he didn't study that in school. But if you ask me, he was raised by veterinarians in a veterinarian practice. He knows a lot more about topics than a lot of doctors I know. And so I listened to everyone this morning, and I want to say, this is so great. You would have loved this. I wish you would have been in there. We have these 3 girls that are started in high school.
Were these the interns?
Yeah.
I think we ran into
and
them
they were
at the
going into
elevator.
college.
Yeah.
And they just produced the whole Mercy Dupree, which is our protective clothing gear against... It protects against nuclear waste in the environment.
Wow.
And so they just produced basically the new campaign for this year. They all work together, and they're going to be doing the videos. And I said, I love learning from an 18-year-old. Like, they came up with a better campaign than our marketing teams. And we have marketing and PR teams that we hire everywhere. And they came up with much better than me. And I said to them, this is much better than anything I would have done if my arrogance and ego would have gotten in the way. And I would have said, wait a minute, I didn't come up with that. Wait a minute, they're 17, 18 years old. Because, you know, women... The younger women are jealous of the older women who've succeeded. The older women sometimes are jealous of the beauty of the younger women. Do you know what I mean? So I always say this, we've got to bring this back. And you were a unicorn for me. Because when I met you, I'm like, great. I'm starting to find this network of women. I referenced Annabelle Morgan, which I wish she would be here today. Grams Morgan is her husband. They were in here when Bentley was in here and everything. But if we can continue this mission from an integrative approach, integrating spiritually, here's my question. Why is it a problem to acknowledge that? Because we know when we do a drug, if we're doing an investigator-sponsored trial, we could go in to treat that patient, and we've gone in before, and they were, all of a sudden it was gone. The tumor was gone. The disease was gone. 2 things we noticed. Prayer. And their eating habits or their nutrition changed. So why can't we acknowledge that as doctors and scientists? We know that. They would say to me, what was different about the patient? Nothing. We never treated them. It's just not there. We can't find it in the ultrasound, or we can't find it in the MRI. And so we're going to wait. And you know, you've seen it in your career.
I have. I had a lady, sweet lady, and I can say her name because her family is very public about her experience, Gwendolyn Boyd. And she's from New Orleans, and she came to me for a second opinion for a stage 4 breast cancer, and no one in her state would operate on her because she had stage 4 disease. And oftentimes you're taught in medical school is stage 4 is terminal.
Yeah.
Now, I was fortunate enough to train at MD Anderson Cancer Center, and we had a whole department of complementary medicine where we saw people from all over the world with stage 4.
Which is what I love about MD Anderson.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I was very comfortable with
Yeah.
that. So prior to me treating her, I would always have my patients, they were required to bring their scans, pre-existing scans. And she definitely had metastatic disease. I said, okay, what I'll do is I'll put you with one of my colleagues to try some medical therapy first to see if we can shrink things down, get things under control. And just, and right before her surgery, she did get treatment for about 3 months.
Yeah.
Right before surgery, I did a rescan, and all of her tumors were gone. And I said, you're going to have to tell me, what did you do? Because I always ask patients, what was your environment like prior to diagnosis and these toxic cancers, external cancers in the environment and in their spiritual lives? And she said, lots of prayer.
Yeah.
And I have to say that impacted me. Like, I know there's a power of prayer in this whole spiritual journey. So it's not just checking the medical boxes.
Change?
Well, that was the main thing. And also she changed her eating habits. Our cancer is controlled by our immune system, and 85% of our immune system is in our gut. So you literally are what you eat. And so that was a major thing. It's just what she was eating, which you mentioned, and also spirituality. And so this was fairly recently, within the 10 years. And this lady, she recently passed, but it wasn't for stage 4 cancer. She ended up having complications from a stroke.
Right.
But she was told, and her family was told, to just get their affairs in order. And 10 years later, she was still alive and well. Another example was very early in my career. I had a young man, this is when I was doing general surgery. He was in his 20s. At the time, I was about 27. He was 25. He was a college student and had colon cancer, stage 4 colon cancer. And we were at Grady Hospital. And the night before, we would admit patients back then. And we reviewed his scans as per protocol with surgery. And he had metastatic disease to the liver, which is common in colon cancer. Is one of the favorite places for tumors to spread. And I remember he was in the surgical holding area, and my attending, Dr. Cole, was very spiritual. And I talk about this in my book. But it was the first time I saw a surgeon pray with a patient out loud. And I have to say, I felt a little unsettled, Dr. Rahm, because we always separate ministry and medicine. It's kind of frowned upon or seen unprofessional. But I'm a student.
You know it is for a scientist, too. Like, it's considered that we're not professional.
Frowned upon. And we put our hands, and we prayed in a circle. The patient's gurney was in the middle.
Yeah.
There's all the nurses and the operating room staff that was going to take him back. He has this thunderous voice, and he prayed for this patient. And I'm just kind of fidgeting, like, okay. So I had my eyes closed, and I'm like looking, and but I could feel.
I'm laughing because I know how I would feel, because when you're used to that environment, that's outside the environment.
It's very sterile, let's just cut it out. Went to the operating room. First thing we do is exploratory laparotomy, where we literally just explore. And you feel the liver, because that's one of the first things you do. And it felt like a baby's liver, like smooth. I'm like, okay, I saw the scan last night, and I know this guy has metastatic lesions the night before. And he had just had the scans maybe a week
And you just seen the scans.
So I told my attending, I said, again, I'm a young surgeon, so I was doubting myself, like, I know I looked at that scan last night, and we all know he has metastatic disease. He put his hands on the liver. He said, this feels like a baby's liver. So, of course, the scientist in us was like, let's rescan him.
But you're thinking, wait, are we crazy?
Like, what is going on here? And got rescanned, and the mets were gone. Now, we still proceeded with the surgery, so let's be clear on that.
What happened in the surgery?
And we still did the hemicolectomy, so we still removed the colon cancer.
Yeah.
But he did much better because he didn't have metastatic lesions to have to battle after surgery. So he still continued with his therapy, but he had a better outcome because now he doesn't have stage 4 disease. He pretty much was cancer-free when we got him off the table.
Yeah.
And the only thing that we did, because he had not had medical therapy, so it's not like he had neoadjuvant, which is therapy before surgery. We prayed in that operating room prior to.
I know you did. I know you did.
Because I had never seen anything like it. And I said that being a scientist makes me more of a believer than not. And people think just the opposite, because there are things that cannot be explained by the medicine that I was trained in, but by the God that I know, and that it's something bigger. I never tell people who or what to believe in, but you got to know that there's something more out there than just us in the medical boxes.
Yeah,
so.
That's how I feel, because I remember a lot of the people that trained me, like transplant surgeons trained me, for example, when I was at Alexion. Yeah, because we were dealing with proximal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, thrombosis. So we were, anyway, our medical director at the time, and I remember basically, I'm not going to mention names, but different people making fun of me because I had a faith. I was the only one, I believed in this something much greater, but I saw it time after time, and it was always two things. And then my father got stage 4 advanced head, neck, and throat cancer.
Really?
Yes. I'm trying to think of how many years ago. Gosh, it was 2000 and I think 11, 2010 maybe. And here I am in oncology. I'd worked at Sarah Cannon, worked with Tennessee Oncology, which is now One Oncology, worked with all those guys, MD Anderson, Cleveland Clinic, Mayo, throughout, Johns Hopkins, Dana-Farber, just
all
knowing all those
hitters,
guys. Yeah, Linda Bosterman when she was over Cancer Centers of America. I mean, so I'm reaching out to all of them, right? And
I know you how does this happen? Like,
how does
should
this
be able
happen?
to help
and
with all these resources?
It's my father, but the truth is my family has had cancer throughout my family. We were raised in a farming community with lots of pesticides. Anyway, you don't know whether it's a combination of genetics and epigenetics.
Sure.
But my dad called me. He's a hunter, and my parents have been together since they were 14, and they know, I'm in the pharmaceutical realm, but then I was doing nutraceuticals. And he called and said, "Sissy, I want to live. Is there, what do you, but I want to still hunt." Like, he's a big hunter. What do you want to do? So my dad ended up, they gave him probably 3 to 6 months, and he went through 30 rounds. It was stage 4 advanced metastatic. So it was throughout the lymph nodes, throughout the body. And they ended up calling him at Vanderbilt a miracle, but I'm just going to tell you, they couldn't figure out. He ended up, it came back again as colon and prostate, got rid of it again. He does take my products. He also did massage and nutrition, but you know what I really think it was?
What?
My mother's prayer.
Wow.
And our prayers.
Wow.
My mom has such a strong sense of prayer that I just know she was on her hands and knees. And she actually called me and said, "I don't want you to make any promises to your dad. We don't know." Because you don't know. The Lord knows, But it's interesting. It's hard for me to talk about it because as a scientist, it's not at all hard for me to talk about God. But as a scientist, people question who I am because of my belief. And I've got a problem with that. Because what would you rather have, a scientist and a doctor that believe in someone much greater?
Exactly.
Or someone that just has no belief and only believes in themselves? Because I've had surgeons tell me, I'm going to tell you this to my face, they don't make mistakes.
Oh, wow.
And you know what my answer is? We all do.
We all do.
Yeah, because I was in neural monitoring.
Wow.
So when you do neural monitoring, it lets you know before it hits a nerve. That was one of the companies we owned. And when that comment would be made to me, I would be like, I think I make mistakes every day, so I'm sure you do too.
That's why we have this nerve monitor.
But you wrote this book, Treat It, Beat It,
and Move On.
Tell me about your book.
Yeah, and the subtitle is The Praying Surgeon's Guide to Prevention.
I love that.
And Treatment and Thriving Beyond Breast Cancer. And again, it's just putting...
I see it, breast surgeon's prayer. How sweet. I mean, not when I say sweet, another thing, when you say sweet, people think that's not... I mean this in the highest compliment. That's amazing.
Thank you. And it's a prayer that I pray with my patients and for my patients, but I thought it's time for me to start sharing with patients that I am praying for you, and are you okay if we pray before surgery? And I never tell people this is not about religion. This is about, the spirituality and just acknowledging the vulnerability that, yes, we can make mistakes, and we do. But we need to understand that there's a higher power that can help make this journey a little easier, a little bit more manageable, where you don't look at it as an obstacle but an opportunity to become a better version of yourself. And I'm right here with you, and he's right here with you, or she, however you want to look at it, but just acknowledging that vulnerability. And like you, when you're in the scientific space, it strengthens your faith, not just the opposite.
No, it does.
Yeah.
I pray anytime I work on a formula, and I pray before I go to bed, and I would say 99.9% of everything I've ever done in business, and I want to say that 99.9%, anything I've done in business, financially
Yeah.
or as a scientist is from dreams I've had from prayer.
Oh, wow.
Because
love
God
that.
talks to us. I mean, I know you know that in different ways, like either through what we see or what we do. I haven't talked about this as much as I have with anyone until you, because it is a hard discussion for me, because people then are like, so you didn't learn anything in school?
Right.
And
That's
I'm like,
so
I did
weird.
learn some in school, and I did work in these 92 countries, but that's not where I get my information, and that's not where I really get my knowledge, is from God.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're celebrated by so many women. One of my questions I keep hearing that I want to ask is, what was your mother like?
Well, my mom, she's very religious.
So she's alive.
And yes, she is.
And what does she think
and
about
also
you?
very spiritual. But I took more so, just like any child, you're going to take the good
Yeah.
and kind of shelve the things that weren't as helpful.
Because
And
none of us have perfect families.
No,
I say
no,
this all the
no.
time. I don't. I love my parents, but I
Yeah.
don't, right?
Yeah,
So-
raising children is like building a plane. It's just taking off sometimes. You're just like, wait a minute. You turn
no
the
one
foot off.
prepares you. You're like, here's these children.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the list from my kids. I get some of it already.
Yeah, so very, very religious, but that's what made me, and I talk about my mom in the book too, and how she really inspired me to be bold about my faith, but to focus on the spirituality and not necessarily religion, because religion is just doing the same thing over and over again without much thought.
That's how I feel.
But you're just doing it out of habit instead of out of your heart.
Yeah.
And so that is what I took from that in terms of the spirituality. And I want to kind of get back to, if you don't mind, just having, praying before business decisions. And I've done that, but I never really talked about it. And so a good friend of mine, Marie, shared with me, she's a very successful pilot, businesswoman, scientist, all the things, that she too would pray before business decisions. And I was like,
now
okay.
I remember. Tell me all
so
about you.
weird.
I didn't
It's
connect
not-
all that.
It's not so weird that I do that. Like, I don't want people to think it's hokey, but it just gives me, like you said, dreams and just intent. And it's in the book is giving people permission, and clinicians permission to kind of tap into your human or superhuman power.
Yeah.
And that's the God that is within us.
Right.
And I've never had a conversation like this in a medical format to talk about like medicine and ministry. Like, it's a first. So
no, mine is a
I
first for
have
me too,
chills.
because it's hard. It's a really it's. I've been criticized about that throughout my career. In
Same.
fact, I want so badly when I go on stage and do talks or do interviews to start with, first of all, I haven't done anything. God has done everything, and I should not be, everyone should know that this isn't me. This is God. But when you say that to someone that hasn't felt that yet, and that guidance, then it's hard for them to understand. But it's been a blessing to meet you, and I want to say this: you have a gift that if you can somehow touch that with oncologists and people throughout the world, oh my gosh, what a major change we would have.
But you've helped give me permission to do that. Not to say like, why do you need permission? It's almost like you want to make sure that your intuition is on the right path.
Yeah.
And how do I go from this idea to execution? And that is collaborative relationships like this one that you've been doing all of this work, but you need like-minded scientists.
Well, and I need experts in their field. Like, I'm not an oncologist.
Yeah.
You are. I mean, I'm just going to speak to you. I'm not an oncologist.
Right.
I am not the only scientist that knows how to work, who has expertise in skincare or nutraceuticals. I will say, I think my gift that God's given me to bring to the table is I understand how to make things cleaner and better and more bioavailable and safe and efficacious, because I was in the pharmaceutical realm for so long.
But you're so brave, though. Do you understand how much bravery and gumption it takes to go from that sort of idea of taking all of your experiences and using it to make money while making a difference, but really help the greater good with the information that you have?
It was hard step for me.
Yeah.
It's going to be, I know you're already in the middle of it, but for me, just so you know, it was hard, because when I was at pharmaceutical and
I wanted
biotech,
to ask, what was the turning point for you where you knew, okay, I've got to do this outside of this sort of corporate arena of how it's being done? How can I do this better?
there's something that happened when I was in pharmaceutical and biotech that, and I loved all the people I worked with, great people. But but it just didn't sit well with me. It was a different direction I knew I needed to take. And then we had owned different healthcare companies. And because I had a pituitary tumor, I had had a syringomyelia, I got really into intraoperative monitoring. And so I started really learning the business of that and started writing white papers of standard of care, trying to make it something that doctors were using, because I do believe doctors can make a mistake, right?
Definitely.
But for me,
that's why it's called the practice of medicine.
Yeah. there is a switch that went off for me. It was my ego that prevented me from doing what I'm doing now, because I was treated so well by the biotech and pharma companies and was in the best environments, best situations, never questioned scientifically. My education never questioned, my career. Once I got out of that world and stepped out, I was criticized for my education. Like, I thought it's a bonus that I went to other countries to school, right? It was.
Then they want you to prove it, like so.
Yeah. Yeah, but what's great is some of the schools were great schools, right? Like, it was like, okay. So it was hard to go from never being questioned to always everyone listening and respecting my opinion to doing business on my own where I have to pay for things. So any loss is my loss, and that I was blamed for things I never did. So my hardest lesson, and I want to tell you this because I will be here for you, and I hope this never happens, and I will cover you to make sure it doesn't. Anything that would happen I would be attacked for, like anything that goes wrong, because women do not naturally, as CEO and scientists and doctors, like to be attacked. Like some men that are competitive are like, this is fun. Like,
it's a blood sport.
Yeah, like, let's go play football. And the women are like, no, I just want to like get a massage.
Right.
And like,
no unnecessary roughness.
So the turning point was with me was really hitting I had gone through an abusive relationship. I had gone through a major change in my life, had 4 kids. I was responsible, had lost a lot of things that I had worked so hard to achieve. And then I just, in my gut feeling was, I have to break through this. And so what I mean by that is, it was at my lowest point that I realized, if I don't step up and become really brave and step up more than I have in the past, I'll never break this ceiling. Because I was being so hesitant to talk about, and I'm still not the person that's going to talk negatively about a system, right?
Right.
I want to change the system, but we've got to talk about the broken pieces.
We have to.
So I'm comfortable talking about the fact of, why are we uncomfortable praying? And I'm like you, it doesn't have to be around a particular religion. Let's pray with the understanding that there's something much greater than us.
That's right.
Like, if you really think about scientifically the human body, oh my gosh.
It's miraculous.
It's miraculous. The cells are each like people.
Yeah.
They're each talking.
And I tell my patients, your body and even your tumors are just as unique as you are as an individual. Now, one of the things that just resonated with me when you were talking about the turning point, and how you was going through an abusive relationship, it was just a lot of toxic things in the environment. Yeah. And my children and I, we love NASA, we love rocket launches, we love like space exploration, all the things. And so we go to rocket launches when we can, or just watch them on television. And one of the things I always liken just going to that next level is when a rocket is getting ready to take off and it's sitting there waiting. There are a lot of parts that are there that need to be there during that moment, right? But then what happens as the rocket starts to ascend?
It drops
them. It drops everything off of it that's unnecessary.
Yeah.
The boosters, all the things. So in order to get to that next level, to break through the sound barrier, to get into the next atmosphere, stratosphere, oftentimes as women, we have to do like you did and have the bravery to shed those parts that aren't serving you. So although you needed those companies, they served you well, they were very supportive. And just like with the rocket being built, you need all those parts as a foundation. But as you break to that next level, that foundation, all those things have to break away.
You're absolutely
for the rocket to get to where it needs to go.
It was
to make
actually
a difference. And you did just that.
I did, but I had now that I'm sitting here and I'm remembering all this, Jeff Patton, he'll probably never watch this, or I could send it to him. Is just a really good human being, good husband, good father, oncologist. Ended up doing a lot of breakthrough things in the field of oncology. He actually said to me one time, we were at a meeting in Miami, and he said, I think you might be ready for something else. Because in my head, pharmaceuticals were amazing. They healed people. They helped people just like a surgery can, right? They're part of that piece. But there was a greater piece for me where why aren't we just doing things every day instead of being on so much medication if we can help it? Like, I understand that sometimes you can't help it, right? And that was so. There were so many people placed in my life that have been centers of. And they're not perfect people, right? Because none of us are.
But I think that's what makes us human. I think the vulnerability is so powerful because we can use that to help others. Like, God blesses us to bless other people, but sometimes it's through our experiences, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, or the experiences of others. And it's almost like He gave you that permission. Right? Like,
Absolutely.
It's okay.
There was another doctor, which I have to mention. His name's Dr. Fernando Diaz. He's an MD, PhD, PharmD, MBA, lawyer. Out of Henry Ford. But his dad was a doctor out of Mexico. They had 13 kids. He was the oldest. His sister's on the Supreme Court in Mexico, I think, now. And Dr. Diaz, I remember one day called me, another strong friend of mine, and said, I need help right now. Can you pray with me? And he had done a surgery, a neurosurgery, and there was a mistake made. And whether it was his mistake or not, he took responsibility, and then he went to the bed of that patient and asked if he could pray by the bed to the family, and he did it. And that was he said to me, Christina, and he was from Mexico, so we talked about natural solutions, because a lot of your different ethnic groups, so if you look at me, my family was Cherokee and Choctaw on my mother's side, and on my dad's side from Lebanon and then Germany and then to the United States, and there was a lot of scientists. I think my great-great-grandmother was a shaman. And so, in that they were healers. But there's lots of all of that going on where I think there's a lot of doctors and surgeons, I'm just going to say this to you, that need to hear what you're saying, because I do believe they think like we think, but they're nervous to stand up and say it. Well, it's because our training has taught us not to. There's not a place in our training, or there wasn't in mine.
Neither was
I wasn't allowed to. As a psychologist, just so you know, when I treated sexually abused kids. I worked with gang members for 4 years. I did schizophrenia, bipolar, and prostitutes. And so those were my areas that I focused on, and we weren't allowed to.
Unbelievable.
And I think in medicine, if we could incorporate, not the religion, but the spiritual part. And the psychological part of understanding that stress does cause autoimmune, environmental triggers.
It's the fight or flight. If you're constantly fighting or fleeing with these stressful environments and people having, just traumatic childhoods, traumatic adulthood, your body.
Did you learn that in college?
No.
Me either.
No.
And you know what? Think about me. I have a master's of science, and I have a doctorate degree in counseling and psychology, and I didn't learn it in there either, really. Do you understand what I'm saying? There were small comments like when you have psychological or emotional and mental stress, it can make you sick, but not really. That correlation was never completely drawn.
No. And it's like our professors were afraid to go there because it wasn't in the textbooks.
No.
And then the textbooks are a lot of times funded by, corporations and organizations that want to kind of stay on this
So do doctors know that?
Many of us don't. Some of us do, and we're afraid to speak up or speak out because you'll get blackballed or ostracized in the medical community. And a lot of times people are like, listen, I have a family and I just can't risk it, even though I know it's the truth, but we can't necessarily go there.
So oncologists are one of the smartest areas of medicine you can choose. Being an surgical oncologist is really hard to do. Transplant surgeons, neurosurgeons, dermatologists, I know the ranges of people and what they have to learn and what they have to do. So here's my question, because during this pandemic, and we're not going to get into negative or positive, because you and I have talked about this, we're not political, we're policy.
We are policy.
And we also understand both sides of the equations of why things happen and why they don't. But it was really interesting to me, because as a scientist, I was always taught to question. Like, I would never have actually been hired, as much as I was supposed to follow the rules at a pharmaceutical and biotech company. If I didn't have the intelligence to think out of the box, they would, come on, those are your top people. You're not there anymore. If you can't debate, if you can't argue, you can't get on a stage and fight with, Pfizer fighting with the Merck scientists, then you don't have a job, right?
Yeah.
So for me, that's a natural part. But when all of this happened in 2019, and I had been spending a lot of my life in Russia, Ukraine, China, Nigeria, that whole period, Singapore, Philippines. So when all this happened, I had been over there, right?
Wow.
And so just with my career, and if you look at the sequence of events in the United States, the doctors were not allowed to question a rule. And for me, it was the hardest thing, because if you look at my career working in Nigeria and Ghana and Uganda and being over India, I could go Lebanon, Syria, like I could go on and on, seeing all this different medicine, understanding, for example, ivermectin, understanding different things. I was completely shocked. I felt like the residents weren't even asking questions, and the doctors, but because I'm here now, right, and not in the hospital every day, I couldn't figure out how everyone was feeling during that. I guess they couldn't do or say anything. What was your perception? Because you were in a private practice during that time.
Yeah, it was challenging. So what my perception is still the same. It's just like, again, looking at policy, right? And looking at science. As a scientist, and you're a scientist, we don't have all the answers.
No.
We're just not afraid to...
We try.
To ask the questions.
Yeah.
So science is about being brave enough and thoughtful enough to ask the questions. You don't necessarily need to have all the answers.
Right.
But a lot of questions that many scientists had kind of went against our scientific knowledge, against the medical knowledge. And so how can we help support patients, support the citizens during this very difficult time, where we can use our science and the science that we know to help individuals have better outcomes. And it's like we had to focus on the greater good, or more so public policy, than the science the foundational science that we know. So that within of itself was a challenge. So one of the things that I use as my approach
do you think most doctors felt that?
Many of us did,
because it was a policy.
Yes,
and that's how I felt. Like for me, and I'm kind of a little bit of a rule follower. I mean, I'll be honest. Like for me, I understand population management. It's a hard discussion for me to have with people, but I do understand population management and predictive modeling, because as a doctor, you can't see 100 people a day.
Right.
So like, I'm just talking about me personally. I do the best I can at the human capability that I have, but I can't fix everything.
No.
Right?
No.
So I understand all these factors, but I always was sitting there and I was wondering, of course I asked my friends, but what is everyone thinking during this?
A lot of us was thinking that, just like tumors are just as unique as the individual, infectious diseases oftentimes can be just as unique as the individual, especially as it relates to the treatment. So not everyone needed the treatment that was recommended for the masses. And so my approach was look at each patient uniquely, but when you're talking about a global crisis, you can't really look at each person uniquely. You have to do what's best for the greater good. So I understood public policy and knew, this is going to be best for the greater good, and that's what we have to focus on to make sure that we are not undermining the people's confidence in leadership, not undermining the science, not undermining the safety and efficacy. So what is the best way to kind of balance the science with what's good for society? And so we just had to make those decisions again for the greater good. But as I came across various patients, I just shared with them, for your unique situation, this approach may be best, or this approach may not be the best approach. Let's try this. So it was more so preventative, natural immunity, and then you have people that are high risk, and we assume that everyone was at high risk, kind of following universal precautions at that point, because we were in a crisis. So urgency, so we have to look at it from a public policy standpoint.
I love that answer. I want everyone to hear that answer, because you don't know this, but I've been heavily criticized on both sides, because I basically give an answer.
Told the lie.
Well, because I get it, but I'm not. I understand policy, and I understand having to make a policy that doesn't fit into every single person's genetics, but you're trying to solve a crisis at that moment.
That's global.
And there's no way you can single out, but don't do this. There's no way to do it.
It's not cost effective. It's not efficient, and it's not sustainable.
No, and I have the hardest time communicating that to people, because then I'm criticized for the fact that I'm taking the pharmaceutical side, or I'm criticized because I'm taking the government side. And all I'm saying is it was a horrible situation that scientifically, I hope, has motivated us to make some changes as scientists and doctors.
Definitely.
That's how I feel.
Yes.
It was a major thing that happened, and I think that people handled it the best they could at the time.
Best we could at the time, yeah.
And I feel like that taught us lessons that we should learn from,
Yeah.
including integrative medicine at this point.
And that we can do things more efficiently.
Oh, yeah.
Because you know how long it normally takes to get from bench to bedside. And
Yeah.
one of the things I had to share with people when they were a little suspicious, like, how did this, vaccine come so quickly? And like, to prove, number one, that something is safe and effective, that's the quick part.
Yeah.
But what our countries did together was make the process more efficient in terms of getting
they did
from bench to bedside after we've proven, the efficacy or the safety. That's the foreshortened part.
But your oncologist, like I just had the lady that did my hair. I do my hair once a week. They blow it out. It looks horrible. It's been a couple of days ago,
I love
but
the highlight.
she had a colon issue. And is going to the GI doctor at Vanderbilt. And I'm not going to mention the doctor's name because I'm going to be protective, but he said to her that it was a combination of the shot and then her eating habits and the pollution and the microplastics. And I felt so great that she had a doctor that explained there's a sequence of things. It's never one thing.
It's never one thing.
It's all the things we're being exposed to. You can't get rid of the bacteria and the viruses. You can't solve everything as a political group or with one policy, but you try to do what's best. And it divided this country and every country so much. I wish that people would leave it in the past, learn from it, and let's proceed in the future to try to do even better. I don't feel like anyone tried to kill a mass population.
Right.
I really don't.
No.
I feel like it was a crisis that happened.
Yeah.
And I understand there's a lot of conspiracy theories and a lot of things around it. From my perspective, I think we did the best we could at the moment.
I agree.
We just didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So one of the products that we have, I don't know if you know this either, Clean Slate is like our flagship product that helps the body clean and detox with heavy metals. Because
And is it okay? I would love to know a little bit more on how
Yeah.
Clean Slate helps to detox, because we just don't talk enough about
No.
heavy metals.
No. I took a zeolite. So if you look at Chernobyl and Hiroshima, Fukushima, all those different things where there was a leak in nuclear components, right? As a nanobiotechnologist, so I actually went back to school for 3 years, and I did it. I was traveling all over the world. I did it online, but the lab portion was in person at Harvard. So if I did my lab work, it had to be there. I could take my classes online, but I had to be on Zoom with the class, right? Because they were in the class at Harvard. And so I spent 3 years trying to figure out how to get rid of things from like vaccines, from nuclear war, from pollution, from bombs, from, making a car and a manufacturing and what goes in the air. It wasn't one thing. I was looking at how do we clean things up and understanding that zeolites were used to get rid in all of those situations to help get rid of the nuclear waste from like a nuclear bomb, right? So I took a zeolite it's probably the only product I've ever worked on that's been criticized so much because it's probably the most effective one that I've worked on.
Wow.
I did get some patents approved as the inventor for reversal of aging that were around that, because you can't. So if your body has heavy metals, if your body, you do not, you look so young. If your body has heavy metals, you know this, it impacts your body.
Yeah. And all those individuals that are exposed to these bombs with the heavy metals all got
and it's
cancer.
not just from a shot, it's from our whole environment.
Yeah.
So I talk all the time about we've got to clean our bodies out. We talk about reversal of aging. You can't do that unless your cells are clean. And it's not going into the cell, it's basically communicating with the body so the body's able to rip apart the positive and negative charges and get those heavy metals that shouldn't be out of the body.
Yeah.
The problem I kept running into was it was stripping some of the heavy metals. So I added in trace minerals. My expertise is bioavailability. So that's my focus in my career, right? I'm able to look at, like, how do you deliver something into a system to hit a steady state
most
or
effectively.
peak most effectively.
And
I think that was how do I say this to you? That was the nutraceutical industry and the pharmaceutical industry didn't know how to wrap their arms around that,
disruptive.
because it's not a pharmaceutical,
Right.
but I did write a pharmaceutical component to that.
Wonderful.
Because I wanted to be able, through an IV formulation, and that's why with South Carolina, I'm working on a bunch of stuff that has to do with research and development.
I love that.
But people, when I travel, like when I met with the Pope, or I'm meeting with the Sheikh, or whoever I'm meeting with, they know me for reversal of aging because the patents were approved for that. Some of the things that I wrote, but really that wasn't my purpose.
Yes.
My purpose was to clean out the body and the cellular age of the body, which is a thing, by the way.
It is.
But they don't teach us that in school either.
No, not at all.
No.
Not at
So
all.
that when it was really, that company that Clayton has was launched in February, I was working on emergency authorization on a project for the lungs with a pharmaceutical company during COVID when that was launched. So he launched that without me, but it was my formulation.
Wow.
And then when I came over a year later, I changed a little bit about the formulations. That's one of the problems I have as a scientist. I'm always wanting to make something better.
You gotta make it better. But you know, oftentimes we say the enemy of good is better.
Yeah.
But as a woman, we just have
Yeah.
a way of wanting to leave things a little bit better than the way we found it. Whether it's
Yeah.
leaving a room and just picking up that paper or putting that dish in the sink, or making the formulation better than the way you found it. It's
Yeah.
just in our nature. And I think that's why it's so important for women to remain in medicine, in science,
Yeah.
you know, to be decision makers, to have seats at the table, because there's just a lot of conscious and unconscious bias as it relates to women and women health. And so to have women at the helm, like you, like myself, I think it's so important that we support each other
Yeah.
and really continue to encourage the young people like your interns to just know that science still is very important. It's even more essential to have that sort of female instinct where
Yeah.
we can use our head and our hearts to make a better difference. So I'm excited about
Absolutely.
what you're doing. And
Well,
what
we're
we can
going to do it together. We need an oncologist that's willing to really represent what we can do for patients. Because here's one of the things, and you already know what I'm going to say probably. When a typical patient goes to an oncologist, and here's what we tell people all the time: we are not their doctor. We are not here to diagnose or treat them. We are here to give guidance scientifically of just what we think can improve the overall greatness of a body. Right? We're really careful how we word everything. Being in 87 countries, we have 87 different rule books to follow.
Wow.
Just so you know. When I produce a peptide, for example, 87 countries have to, like, one of the peptide lines that I worked on that we take orally is in Switzerland, a pharmaceutical, right? So every country's different. On
in terms of their policies and
yeah,
procedures. Yeah.
the manufacturing facility that I bought, though, that we've already gone in for, like, DOD registration, over the counter, like I told you earlier, biologics,
yeah.
so we can do all of that. But
But I just have to stop you 1 minute, because I just want our listeners to understand how profoundly impressive that is, because so many scientists don't have the mental, emotional, financial wherewithal to negotiate the policies and procedures of one country,
I know.
let alone over 80 countries. That's so much legwork, so much hard work. It's truly a passion project.
It's a passion.
But you believe in it enough, and you've been strategic enough with your relationships and with your academic pedigree and your expertise and passion to know that that matters. And so I just applaud you for just having the
you.
wherewithal to do that.
Well, we had thank you, but we had a mission, and the mission was not just my products. So the mission, and people don't know this, but when we set up the contracts with everything that we did, I actually wrote it into the root contract that I would have the ability to approve products, but that my anything financial was never tied to me. Does that make sense? Because I was worried that later I would develop an ego and think I was the only one that could make products. And I always try to put these things around me, like I identify my weakness, and we all have that weakness,
You put
right?
up your own guardrails.
And I do. I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to put in place. Because one of the problems when you succeed in life, and the higher you go, is you can lie to yourself, and you can tell yourself that you know the most, or that
and
you
can
are
have
the smartest.
enablers around you that will perpetuate that.
That's the issue. And so you think you're the only one. And I don't ever want that. That's the wrong way. You can't succeed. If you look at any great president we've ever had, by the way, they all surrounded themselves with people that were different than they were, who had different belief policies, because you can't think one person's going to have all the answers. And that mission was to provide the best products in healthcare and in lifestyle throughout the world, and to change even packaging. So like probably my favorite patent is a patent I wrote where you can actually eat the package.
I love that.
And it's from algae, so you get all the vitamins and minerals from the package.
Oh my gosh, that's so brilliant.
And
See, only a woman scientist would think of that.
No, because no one else cares. So I had this vision of this beautiful package that you could eat, right?
I love it.
And so that's one of the things that the government is helping us with. So, but thank you for being on the show. But I want this to be more than a show. I want to collaborate.
Yeah. Thank you for the privilege of the platform and trusting me with your listeners, your viewers.
Did you get all of our products? Did they give you all of our products to try?
Goodies. That's why I'm feeling great right now.
We have some products, but hopefully we can work with your team to develop even more products that we can push out to the world to help people. Because one of the questions I always get is, and I didn't finish this, I have a surgery or I have chemotherapy, and can I take any supplements, right? And of course, I wish we had an oncologist we partnered with that we could refer, because I think one of the aspects of medicine that's going to change is private health care and being able to see a doctor in the United States, even if you're in Germany or Australia. But we've got to have doctors that are willing to listen. Yeah. One of our doctors was the head PharmD at Henry Ford, and Dr. Fadwa has done a really great job at helping people understand the pharmacodynamics and everything that goes into the bioavailability. But having you to partner with or collab with would be great, because then people could go to you. Yeah. Because I'm not their doctor, right? And I can't do surgery, and I'm not an oncologist. Yeah. So I just want to say thank you, and I look forward to our future, and I look forward to your future. And I think people should read the book, Treat It, Beat It, and Move On.
Thank you.
And and I have to say your prayer in the beginning. This would make my mother's. Yeah. My mother would be so happy. We had Bible study every morning down at the table. So I had a mother like you. Oh my That's God. Why I was asking.
But I say that prayer every surgery. Every single surgery. So.
Well, I'm so impressed with everything you're doing, and so thankful to be here with you today. Thank you.
Thank you.